Hello, I'm Scott D'Agostino and welcome to Movies. Before I get to my main list of the show, I'm going to talk about some of the movies I watched during break that I didn't get a chance to tell you about before we sent off last semester. First up is 47 Ronin starring Keanu Reeves. It is a very boring movie, and the special effects are very awful, especially considering that it cost $175 million. It looked a lot worse than, say, I don't know, Titanic, and that just cost like 25 million more. Grade C-. Next up is Anchorman 2. It's not as funny as the last Anchorman, but those pretty high standards to live up to. It's still a funny movie, but if you're going and expecting it to be as good as the first one, you'll leave disappointed. Still pretty funny. Grade A-. Next up is Grudge Match, starring Robert De Niro and Sylvester Stallone. And if you ever wanted to see a two-time Academy Award winner get out-acted by a man with 10 Razzies, then you might want to see this movie. Otherwise, just steer clear. It's basically a shameless rip-off of both Rocky and Raging Bull, and you're better off just staying home watching the originals. Grade C+. Next up is The Hobbit, The Desolation of Smaug. I really liked the first Hobbit, but not a lot of people did. But The Desolation of Smaug blows that one out of the water. It has great acting, great action, basically good plot. Not as good as the original Lord of the Rings movies, but that's still good. The only issue I had was the ending, which was very abrupt, but it makes you want to see the next one even more. Grade A. Next up was a movie that made my list of the least anticipated of 2014, Paranormal Activity: The Marked Ones, and I was right on the money to put it on there. It manages the almost impossible task of making the last Paranormal Activity look like a good movie. The scares are boring, the acting's bad, it's just awful overall. Just watch the first one again, or the second or third one. Grade D. The final movie I saw over break, it was Saving Mr. Banks, a movie about the making of Mary Poppins. Shockingly, this was snubbed at the Oscars, only getting a nomination for Best Score. Emma Thompson and Tom Hanks were snubbed for their performances. Grade A-. There are several other movies I saw over break, but I'll talk about them next week when I do my Best of the Year list. But for now, I'm doing my Worst of the Year list. Number 10 was a hard spot. I was going to go with either The Canyons or Identity Thief, so I'm making them both at number 10. The Canyons is a god-awful movie from Paul Schrader, who he wrote Taxi Driver and Raging Bull, and he should know better. Lindsay Lohan's awful in it, and the only good performance comes from adult film star James Dean. The Identity Thief was one of the most unfunny comedies of the year, and features just an awful performance from Melissa McCarthy. It's so bad it'll make you forget Memories of Bridesmaids. They both got an F from me, and so does all the other movies on the top 10. Number 9 is Battle of the Year, a movie about b-boying. If you have no idea what that is, you won't learn it from this movie because it expects you to know it. They do say that it's about dancing, but that's all you'll get. Not helping matters, Chris Brown's in the movie, basically playing himself. The only reason this isn't higher on the list is because Chris Brown gets punched out at one point, and it was glorious. People should be making gifs of it, but the rest of the movie was just awful. Number 8 is Safe Haven, the worst movie based on a Nicholas Sparks novel, and considering how awful all the other Nicholas Sparks movies are, that's saying something. It features awful performances from Josh Duhamel, like Julianne Howe and Kobe Smulders, and it features one of possibly the dumbest ending of the year. It's just awful and stupid and audience insulting. Number 7 is Scary Movie 5. Why does this movie exist? Seriously, why? It starts off with Charlie Sheen and Lindsay Lohan. It only goes downhill from there. By the way, that's not even the worst Lindsay Lohan movie this year. but we'll get to that in a few minutes. Number 6 is The Big Wedding, starring Katherine Heigl. I could have stopped with starring Katherine Heigl, and then you'd know why it's on there, but I'll go into details. It's about an old divorced couple played by Robert De Niro and Diane Keaton, who pretend to be married for their adopted son, Ben Barnes. Oh yeah, Ben Barnes, he's playing a Mexican guy, but he's one of the whitest people ever, like Duran Duran white. And they just slathered him with grease and pretend he's a Mexican. Seriously. Not helping matters, Robin Williams hams it up as an annoying priest. Katherine Heigl got a deserving Razzie nomination, and I am definitely voting for her. Number 5 is the biggest bomb of the year and of all time, The Lone Ranger. I already ripped it apart a few months ago, but it's so awful I need to do it again. Johnny Depp's awful and racist. The movie is an hour longer than it needs to be, and it's seriously dark. Seriously, there's a scene where the villain eats the Lone Ranger's brother's heart. Yes, really. The only good part was the ending train scene, and that's why it's not higher. Number 4 is After Earth from M. Night Shyamalan. If you looked at the promos, you'd think it stars Will Smith, but he just sits in a chair for 90 minutes and does a funny accent. Instead, his talent-deprived son runs around and makes a fool of his family name. God, that kid cannot act. Thankfully, he doesn't have any more films on the horizon. Number 3 is Grown Ups 2, starring Adam Sandler. I could just stop there, like I did with Heigl, but I'm not going to. It's one of the most unfunny movies I've ever seen, and the reason it's not the worst Sandler movie is because Jack and Jill exist. The worst thing about Grown Ups 2, it apparently has an anti-bullying message, but the main characters do nothing but bully people who aren't the same as them during the whole movie. Women who work out, lesser than them. People who are gay, lesser than them. Basically anyone that's not them, inferior. So basically Adam Sandler is a Nazi. Number 2 is Movie 43. It's a sketch comedy movie from 13 different directors and features a litany of stars like Halle Berry, Hugh Jackman, Kate Winslet, and others. It's a shame the movie is completely unwatchable. If you ever want to see stars humiliate themselves, just go to YouTube and look up that. You don't need to see this abomination. And now the worst movie of the year. Inappropriate comedy, directed by the ShamWow guy, starring Lindsay Lohan, who gives the best performance in the movie. Yes, seriously. Also shaming themselves are Rob Schneider and Adrian Brody, who plays a gay Dirty Harry parody called Flirty Harry. It's a sketch comedy movie that manages to make Movie 43 look like the Kentucky Fried Movie. It's one of the most unfunny movies of all time, and it makes all the other bad movies this year look like great ones. It makes Movie 43 look like Airplane. It makes Grown Ups 2 look like Animal House. It makes After Earth look like Avatar. And it makes The Lone Ranger look like The Searchers. You should not see any of the movies I just mentioned in my list, but make sure to see all the movies I mentioned in next week's list of the best movies of the year. I am Scott D'Agostino, and I'll see you at the movies.